Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Howdy, y'all. Reverend Laughlin here. This is the Corner Bookstore on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. Today, I'm honored to have Adam Wilson, fiction author, award-winning author, on the show. He's written several books and variety backgrounds, also in creative writing and some other things. So we're going to get a chance to get into a little bit in depth as to what he did. So, Adam, why don't you join me, please?
Hey, how's it going?
Exceptionally well, as always. Your book, the one I see on your website, Sensation Machines, interesting title. That's you did that just a 3 years ago, right?
Yes, that's the other Adam Wilson. There are actually several Adam Wilsons who are writers. I am not the Sensation Machines one. I get that a lot, though.
Yes, I have this problem a lot when I go in there and I look somebody Adam Wilson author, and I apologize for that. So you're the comic.
I am, yes.
Okay. I saw your website too, or I saw some information on you. So let's not worry about the other Adam Wilson right now. And we're just going to concentrate on you. So I'm going to have to wing it a little bit here. So why don't we begin with what prompted you to start writing, and then we'll start with your history of writing and go from there. So tell us a little bit about Adam Wilson, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Yeah. I started writing back when I was in college. It was something I'd kind of just done casually, growing up all my life. But I was writing specifically for comics. It kind of happened by accident with a friend of mine. We were in our senior year of undergrad, and he was a graphic design major. I was pre-law, but I was so burnt out from just my classes and everything that was happening that I knew I didn't want to kind of continue on into law school. So we had kind of one of those late night, we're about to graduate, what do we want to do with our lives conversations. And we really what started out as just this, oh man, I don't know that, it's overwhelming with the whole idea of graduating, eventually evolved into, well, what if we were to kind of do something together? I always kind of have been just writing, whether I was in a band, writing songs, or just writing scripts for, one-act plays that were being done by acting classes in my high school, things like that. So I'd always been writing, but I just had never really done it in any capacity other than as a hobby. But suddenly I had my friend, who was this graphic designer. He was an incredible artist. And we kind of said together, what could we do collaboratively that would be fun? Because if you have to work with your friend, work with the people that you want to work with. And so we came up with this idea of, why don't we just start writing comics together? Why don't we start just doing something and see where it goes? So we wrote a couple of mini comics. I wrote them, he illustrated them. We printed them out in the school's computer lab and stapled them together on my dorm room floor. And then we just, went around to local bookstores, comic shops, started selling them. And we did a few. It kind of didn't last that long, but graduation kind of came, and that was when we kind of started to lose the momentum that we had. But I really loved that collaborative working with an artist, kind of putting together an idea and having it take shape in this sequential media form. And so even though I stopped working with him on the projects we were doing, I kind of really decided that I want to keep going with it. I wanted to write more. And so I just started looking online, finding different people who were also interested in the same thing and connecting with them. I started writing short stories that were getting published in anthologies, taking on editing jobs for different companies, small presses who were looking for people to do comic editing. And before long, I kind of wanted to do something really a bit bigger. So I wrote a script for a graphic novel, and I shopped it around to a few different artists to see if anyone was interested, and I had a couple like starts and stops, but then eventually I found someone, a guy named Franco, to work with, and he did an amazing job. We submitted it to some publishers, and they picked it up, and that was kind of like the first big piece that I got published. It was a young adult graphic novel called Brian and Bobby, and it was this whole idea of these two kids that were in this superhero world, one of whom was kind of born with superpowers, but no one really noticed because he came from such a big, loud family, and he was this very quiet kid. And then the other character, Bobby, was the daughter of a superhero who everyone had such high expectations for, but she was just a regular kid, and she was kind of stuck in this world where everyone was just kind of like waiting in anticipation for her to do something, and she was never going to do anything. So it's kind of the story of how the two of them meet, become friends, and like that different dynamic of those two different upbringings, how they kind of clash and complement each other in certain ways, and how just the evolution of their own personal journeys and their friendship kind of over the course of the story takes place. And so that was the first book that I did, and it was really well received, and so much so that the publisher kind of let me do another one. So it kind of took off from there, and what became this kind of like accidental thing that I was doing because I didn't want to have to actually worry about getting a real job became something that I was able to do a little bit more fully. And so now I'm kind of at the point, and I've been doing this for about 15 years. I've published I think I just released my 5th graphic novel, Last of the Pops, back in October. And I'm also working with my wife. We have a small press publishing company that we do together where we publish graphic novels. She's a fiction writer, so we do fiction, we do essay collections, things like that.
Interesting. Where do you all go to college?
The college, New Jersey. It's based at Central New Jersey, not too far from Princeton.
And you're still living in that same area?
We are, yes, yeah. When my wife graduated, she had gotten a job as a writing professor there, so she was doing that until we transitioned over to doing Read Furiously.
Okay, so when I saw on your information that you put in when we were backstage, author Last of the Pops, and that wasn't one of the ones that connected with the other Adam Wilson that I had. Okay, fine, he's written a new book, but he didn't update his website. Okay, we get that. Not a problem. So anyway, I'm glad we get that all cleared up. I have a direction to go in, and you got it started out here. So 15 years, and was your degree in graphic artistry or anything like that, or is that just a talent you picked up over time?
No, my degree was pre-law, but it was something that I just picked up over time. Like growing up, I'd always enjoyed writing. I think I wrote my first movie when I was like in 3rd grade, and then I had my parents and my friends act it out in our backyard. And then I was writing for the literary journal in our high school. I was in bands all throughout college and high school. I was writing songs and things like that. And so it was one of those things that I'd always just kind of done in passing and never really thought too much of it until I had that conversation with my friend where it just kind of a kismet moment happened, and we both were kind of like, let's try this, and it stuck.
Okay, so your writing started very early, a variety of things. You've kind of honed in into the I'm not going to say comic, graphic aspect of that. We've had, I think, one other illustrator on the show over time. So you're my second graphic artist, so to speak.
Okay, nice.
And that takes a lot of talent because it's an interpretation of something that I want this, and I have to be able to convey that, and then you're giving me back and forth. It's a tough job. It really and truly is. So
it is, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, when you're working with an author to produce a graphic novel or whatever the kind of book is with the illustrations, what kinds of things are you looking for? Let's say I'm hiring you to do something. What would a conversation be like with me trying to get a character for my book in order to make your job easier?
So when I'm writing for a graphic novel and I'm talking with an artist, the thing that I really want to do is I want to make sure that they understand the tone of the book, and kind of also make sure that, like, the first thing you always want to do is you want to kind of just look at their art style in general, because one of the key things about sequential storytelling is because it's so visual, the the character design, the way that you draw settings, the color schemes you choose are all going to be an active part in telling the story. So you want to make sure that the person that you're working with really understands the tone of the book and what you're looking to do with it. And then you also want to make sure that they understand that their art style can kind of match that. So when you're doing that, you really kind of want to make sure that you're just that they're coming to the table already with something there, that it's not going to be a struggle for them to kind of match the art style, but then also that they cannot kind of understand and interpret, okay, these are the types of characters, these are the types of emotions that they're going to feel, these are the way we're going to need to convey them. And then that's a big part of it as well. And then just also looking at, how they can tell a story visually, because there's a misconception that the storytelling for a graphic novel takes place in the pictures, but the storytelling actually takes place in between the transition from picture to picture. So there's a great book called Understanding Comics that Scott McCloud did, and he talks about the concept of closure, where between one panel and another, that's all of the action. And you want to make sure that whoever you're working with understands that, when you give them a script and you're kind of laying out in panel 1, this needs to happen, in panel 2, this needs to happen, in panel 3, this needs to happen, they kind of understand, what needs to be highlighted, what needs to be focused from an artistic perspective. So visually, as you're going from panel to panel, you can kind of see that transition of action, and they can it makes it easier for the reader to kind of insert that flow of movement between the different panels and interpret the story themselves as they're going through it.
Okay, so I work, I also have my own publishing company, so I have a real appreciation for what you're doing. And sometimes I get a client, an author, who kind of knows what they want for the book cover, because I want to get in book covers with you on the books you have, because you got some interesting ones.
Thank you.
And I use AI sometimes. Okay, this is what you want. I'll give him 3 or 4 different presentations of it. And then once he says, okay, 2 and 3 look good, I'll send 2 and 3 to a designer who does this for a living. And then I give them the rest of the story, 2 or 3 paragraphs of what is the book about, so that they can take and get a better front cover, because that cover is what, that's the first thing people see when they look at your book.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm looking at, one of your books here, Last of the Pops, that's your most recent one. And I see you have some pretty interesting ones, Brooklyn Family and Isn't She Great, writers on just a lot of different ones. So why don't we talk a little bit about your cover design? Obviously you have the interior already developed. Have to take and have an attractive, eye-grabbing cover. How do you take everything you've worked with and now come up with the cover, or do you kind of start with the cover and work your way through your book? Or
so I do. We actually like to start with the cover, because, like you said, the cover is the first thing that you see that's going to establish the tone for the book. And even if it's not a graphic novel, we want the visuals of the cover to establish what the person is going to be reading inside. So we always like to start with the cover and let that kind of set the tone that we can then kind of carry into, font choices, layout choices that we do on the interior. And I mean, with that, we take a multi-pronged approach to that. So one of the things that we always look at first is we really value the author's input. This is their baby. This is the thing that they've been working on for who knows how long, sometimes years. What are their opinions on the important aspects of this book? What are the things that they want to convey to a reader in this book? And sometimes that's obvious, and you can get that just by reading the manuscript. Other times there are some textual things that it might not necessarily be obvious in reading the book. But I think one example that we had was we have a story called Putting Out: Essays on Otherness, and you don't really know this by reading it, but one of the big themes that the author wanted to convey was this idea of kind of blooming and growing into the person that you are. So we ended up using a flower motif for the cover, and obviously Essays on Otherness, we wanted that flower motif to have like just one particular flower that stood out as being different. But we wouldn't have come up with that motif if we didn't kind of talk to the author and say, okay, like, what are some of the imagery that you kind of associate with this book? Not necessarily things that are directly related to it, but what are some things that kind of come to mind when you personally work through the book? And they talked about that idea of blooming and flowers. And so, that was kind of what led us to that choice. Whereas with Brooklyn Family Album, which is one that you mentioned, that one is kind of a person's personal history about their family growing up in turn of the century Brooklyn, New York. So for that one, we really wanted to kind of encompass this idea of like old fashioned Brooklyn. And so we went through and we found some imagery of, old fashioned family tenement buildings. And because this was something that was so specific to her family, we really wanted to take that image and kind of consolidate it. So even if you look at the placement of the title against the building, it's flat up against it. The title is a part of the building, just like, the family is kind of all together in that one space.
Yeah, I'm seeing that now. It's almost like a 3-book series that's packaged, and it's the building and the name of the title of it. It's very well done, actually.
Oh, thank you.
I noticed that you have at least 3 dozen authors on your author page, the ones that you've published. Pretty impressive.
Yes.
How many of those have come back for second, third, fourth, fifth publishing schemes? I have some authors just one time only. That's all they want to be, is a published author. They don't want anything else. And others, they want to make it a serious business. And so, anyway, what kind of repeat business do you typically have?
The majority, I would say, actually have some level of repeat engagement with us. And in some cases, it's just, they published one book with us and now they'll contribute to short story anthologies we've done. In other cases, we are kind of like their go-to publisher, so they don't even really submit to other folks. But I'm going to say, like, with at least 75% of our authors, we have, if not already published multiple books with them, we're in conversation to take on additional work from them as they have it available. So we really, and I think part of that is just that we really value that kind of collaborative experience between the author and the publisher. We're not just going to take their book, put it together and send it out into the world. We really want to kind of work with them to build a manuscript that they're proud of, put them through this editorial process that really gives it the care and insight that the manuscript deserves. I mean, my wife heads up the editorial team and she is actively involved in every single book that we have. And so she kind of takes even just in terms of oversight, working with the other team members that we have, she is actively involved and has a very rich and deep understanding of every book we publish and every author's goals for those books. And so we're really making sure that we're kind of taking all of that into account and building out these books with the authors who really are going to be happy with the final product that they create and want to kind of do more.
Okay, so you as a publisher, do you provide editing and proofreading and other services, or do you just publish only, or what kind of services do you do as a publishing company?
We're a traditional publishing house, so we do basically everything. We have a production team that I've headed up where we do design, layout, all of that. And then my wife heads up the editorial team where we do, not only just reviewing manuscripts, but editorial, the full left from micro to macro, high level, does the story make sense, down to simple proofreading and grammar checks and things like that. So we run the full gambit. And then obviously we work with partner organizations who handle the printing and distribution, and then we handle marketing as well. And that, again, that's a very collaborative thing that we do with the authors, because everyone has their own different level of comfort with what they would be willing to do. Like, some people are like, get me a book tour. I want to be in a dozen bookshops and doing signings. Whereas other people are like, I'll do a podcast interview, or maybe I'll do a guest post on a blog, but I don't really, their personality isn't the type where they want to be out front facing the public. And so we work with all of our authors to kind of figure out what's the right way to promote their book. And also tonally, certain books, it doesn't make sense to have this big elaborate book tour for a person if that, book doesn't really have the tone that would be welcomed at a bookstore for, a reading or something like that. So, it's kind of thinking of what would be best for the book and what would be best for the author too.
Okay, our production engineer has the ability to pull up your Brooklyn Family album. Why don't we pull that one up here and just take a quick look at that? I thought it was pretty impressive for myself.
Thank you. Yeah, and this is part of our one and done series, actually. And the nice thing about the one and done series is it is a collection of pocket-sized books. So they're all 4 by 6 inches, literally just about the size of a cell phone, and they're designed to kind of travel with you go. So They're all single standalone stories, all
Okay.
self-contained, and really high quality storytelling to make sure that it's not going to require a lot of time, but at the same time it's reading.
Yeah, the part that I liked particularly about that one, since you said it was a combination of stories, the first thing I saw was the windows, and each window kind of has their own story to tell from whatever. And that just kind of added into my brain as to, well, I kind of really like that. Your latest book, Last of the Pops, why don't we pull that cover up for just a quick second
Oh,
and
sure.
tell us about why that one's totally different than the last one, and it obviously has to
Yes.
be, but tell us a little bit about the design on that and what that conveys to you.
Exactly. So, Last of the Pops is an epistolary story that is told from 5 different characters' perspectives. One of it centers around the last days of radio and kind of the final radio broadcast ever, where one of the stories kind of takes place years after. A few of the stories take place before, and some of them take place right in the middle. But so with that, we wanted to kind of capture a whole bunch of different elements in there, and we wanted to find different ways to express them. So, for example, you can see scattered, kind of hidden throughout the entire cover. You can see the different characters, kind of like to varying degrees in the background. But then also one of the big character pieces that we talk about is one of the characters is a graffiti artist who her mother passed away. She's kind of estranged from her brother, who is her entire support system because he's now away at college. And she copes with this through basically going out and tagging walls, spray painting art across buildings in her town. And then so what we wanted to do is wanted to find a way to kind of incorporate, the different elements of storytelling, the different perspectives of the story, and also, the music element, the street art element, where so we had the artists who worked on this, we had them both kind of, again, pull characters into it, but have many of the elements look like something that you might see tagged on a building. So all the guitar, the just graphics are all kind of things that you might see in someone's graffiti tag. The font that we chose is a very specific font that is reminiscent of, again, what someone might tag on a wall for graffiti. And so we tried to pull that together and make it look a little bit chaotic, kind of like you might see on a passing train. Because in the story, there's a piece about how graffiti on a train is kind of similar to a song being broadcast over the radio. Because when someone tags a train, it kind of is just going to head out across the landscape. And the person who tagged it doesn't really know what's going to happen to it. But there are going to be people along every single stop of the way that see that train and see that tag, and it will leave some kind of an impression on them, whatever that may be. And in the same way, radio is kind of a parallel to that, where you have people that are broadcasting these songs that they've created over the airwaves. They don't necessarily know whose car it's going to end up being played in, or what store might be playing it at whatever point, but it's kind of going out there and it's just existing in the world, and people are finding it and discovering it. And so we thought that parallel was really, really interesting, and so we wanted to kind of pull elements of that into the cover design.
Well, you caught me immediately when I looked at the cover, Last of the Pops, because you had the black with the white, and to me it looked like, as you call it, street art because of, of the way it was done. So that was okay, fine. And then I'm looking at the guitar, I'm looking at some other, and so you kind of, the title is not something I would expect. Last of the Pops, okay, get at least questions going there. But the cover art, that part, I really did. It caught my attention for a minute. Just giving you some, feedback on your story from what I see. You mentioned trying to help your customers from your publishing company market their books. So it's a typical question I ask if you were just an author only. I say, when did you start marketing your book? And most of them, if they're brand new, it's I waited till the book was done and then they started marketing. I try to get my clients to market as soon as they are starting to write the book. So you got two trains going down parallel tracks, and you're not worried about. Now you have an accountability issue because you're telling people you're having a book. And if you don't tell anybody, well, there's no accountability. Nobody knows. and you have that extra year you can write. So, how do you help your clients with their marketing, and tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, with each of our authors, we really try and focus on a 6 year, or no, I'm sorry, 6 month plan, because we want, like, we've experimented with a few different scenarios over the years of kind of like a small ramp up leading up to the release, a much longer period, like you talked about, where we're talking about the writing process, the editorial process. And one of the things that we found is if you go too long, people get burnt out, but people also lose interest. But if you go too short, it's not really enough time to build up that interest. So we found that about 6 months or so is a good window because it's enough time to introduce the book, offer some teases about what it is, what it's about, have some people start reviewing it, getting blurbs and things like that, and then ultimately doing a gradual build to when the book is actually ready for release. That's when you kind of have what we call the book birthday. It's the official day of the book release. And then from there, you can kind of build on whatever momentum that you've gathered over those 6 months and really kind of continue that on. And we always say that marketing is a marathon, not a sprint. So that's really, really true, because you have to look at it from, like, again, that 6 month period of building up to it. But then if this is going to be your only book, or if it's going to be the book that you're going to have until your next one comes out 2 years from now, that should be the thing that you're talking about. That should be the book that you're promoting. That should be whenever you're doing a post about your writing, that should be the focus of it. So you really have to go into it like knowing that 6 months is a long time to be talking about something. And then afterwards, you have to keep talking about it as well. And I think that's one of the things that we try and stress with our authors, because a lot of them, it's like they're totally open to doing all of the prep work leading up to the book, and then it's kind of like the book is released, it's this sigh of relief, because it's like, yes, this is done, this is out in the world, it's awesome, it's amazing. But then it's like, now also the real work begins, because now you have to kind of keep it in people's mind's eye. You have to be there engaging with bookstores and getting people who might not have heard of it before aware. So it really is that long-term commitment that you have, along with just the upfront, everything leading up to the book's release.
Okay, so on the book release, you have a certain amount of events that happen there. But as I'm looking at that marketing deal, whether it's social media or other kinds, one of the things that seems to be a question in most new authors: what do I charge for the book? You know, what's the price? And do you have any marketing strategies? Obviously, we have Cyber Monday and Black Friday and all the rest of that stuff coming up. But for somebody releasing a book in March, is there something that you recommend to them on setting a price, or do you have a formula you use for the particular type of genre, or what?
We do. I mean, it's a lot of it is based on the overall costs of the book. Like, I mean, because with book printing, obviously the page count, color, black and white, all of those things factor into how much a book is going to cost to print. But then we also have to look at, like, how much are we putting towards the marketing? How much is the author willing to do on their own? How much are we going to be taking on as the publisher? And we kind of factor all of that into it as well. And then from there, we kind of build out a number that will still be reflective of the overall industry, but also kind of make sure that we're not racing to the bottom, I guess you could say. So, we take all those things, those factors into effect, and we usually, I mean, our prices will vary. We try and have some consistency in different types of titles. So, for example, the one and dones, we through the first 10 volumes of the book that we've done, we kept it at a consistent $9.99. Now that so much has changed in the past 10 years that we've been publishing, we are probably going to have to increase the prices going forward, but we're going to try and keep them consistent again, so that there's, it's a known thing. A one and done will always be this amount of money. But again, it's dependent on, how much is this book going to cost to create? How much are we going to have to invest in terms of, manpower? Because, like I said, we're a traditional press, so it's not something that we charge for our services. It's a situation where we're going to put in all of this work up front to make sure you have the best book possible. And then when we want to make sure, once the book starts selling, that, all of that effort that we put into it, that the author put into it, pays off in the sales of the book.
Okay, so you do ebooks and paperbacks. I'm sure that's a standard for most. Do you also do
Yes.
hardcovers and audiobooks or anything like that, or do you contract that out?
We don't do hardcovers. We for a few different reasons. From a sustainability perspective, we don't believe in hardcovers because um, they're much they have a much larger footprint to produce, and they are more difficult um, to store and maintain. So it's adding unnecessary waste into a process where there's already a lot of resources being taken up. Also, from a sustainability perspective for pricing, hardcovers are always more expensive, and we don't want to be people who are unnecessarily pricing books too high so that people have to spend more money than they need to actually get the books. We would much rather have people buy our books in paperback because it's easier for them to afford than sell a fancy hardcover. And I think that's really one of the key things that we focus on, is because we believe in a sustainable reading journey, and that's twofold. It's making sure that, as a publishing company who relies on paper products and the energy that goes into producing those products, we're making conscious choices to keep that footprint as low as possible, but also making sure that we're doing this for readers who, especially right now, don't have a lot of extra money in their pockets. We're making sure that we're not leading them dry on every single book so that they can afford to pick up with as many as they may want to.
Okay, the sustainable reading thing. I noticed on your website, which is readfuriously.com, if I remember right. I don't know.
Yep, that's
anyway,
right. Yep, that's
you had a thing called Sequential Underground. Talk to me a little bit about that, because that kind of captured my attention as I was plowing through your website. Okay, what is this?
Yes. So, I mean, and this is something newer that we've actually done. The Sequential Underground is a online bookstore that we purchased a few years ago. They specialized in at the time they specialized in curated reading lists for people, and so basically they would come up with a genre and they would pick books that no one had ever really heard of before, but were really, really great stories that that they felt should be getting more attention than other people have. And they featured a few of our books on lists way back when, and when we kind of got to like what they were about in terms of this idea of kind of like discovery and bringing people to books that they may not have ever thought existed. And so we worked with them on a few projects, and then we kind of absorbed them into Read. And we didn't want to change too much about what they were doing. We saw their business model. So we incorporated their website into ours, and we use it now as an online bookstore where people can go and find books that aren't Read Furiously titles, but they're titles that maybe authors from Read Furiously really, really like, and it might not be that well known. Or one of the most recent things that we've done is we started a subscription box service. So now we have a monthly pick, and again, it's going in line with kind of the one and done series of small pocket books that are easily portable. We pick these smaller books that can be travel with you very easily, but also we kind of build the theme around it. So our first one was Here Be Dragons, where we had an entire box built around mythology, folklore, mythical creatures, things like that. There was a dream that we include, a book. We include a companion zine, which in this case was all about the Chinese Year of the Dragon, and then kind of some just like fun accessories and things like that. So with this particular box, we included a reading coin, kind of in honor of Smog, the hoarder of gold. But one side is, go to bed. The other side is read one more chapter. And that way, at the end of the night, when you're getting ready for bed, but you don't want to put your book down, you turn to the coin, flip it, and let it make the decision for you. And so, yeah, we kind of, Sequential Underground is kind of our place to be book fans as much as Read Furiously is for our place to be publishers. So Sequential Underground really lets us explore like reading culture in a way that just being a publisher doesn't.
Okay, readfuriously.com is your website. How did you come up with that name?
That actually is all thanks to my wife. She was working at this was still when she was working at the TCNJ, and she was in the library one day working with some students, and there was a lull. It had been a very frustrating day. She was exhausted. She was tired. She had a bad day, and she was like, there has to be something more to this. I have a writing degree. I've been published. I had some really awful experiences being published. I want to do something more. And so she started. So right then and there in the school library, she went to Blogger and she registered the domain readfuriously.com. And the whole idea of it was just read often, read well, read furiously. Read with a passion, read for the love of reading, be excited about literature, be excited about books, and just be happy that you get to experience all these wonderful stories. And so it started as a blog that she was doing. She was doing book reviews. She was, reporting on upcoming releases and things like that. And she was just kind of using it to celebrate her love of reading. And she did it for a few years. And then when we were both kind of becoming disillusioned with the publishing industry, we not really that interested in maybe we could do this ourselves. Maybe we could take all the experiences that we've had that we've liked, all the experiences that we had that we didn't like, and maybe we could turn it into something that's actually really useful and can help authors in a way that we wish we had been helped at the very beginning of our career. And so we're like, you know what? You have this blog, Read Furiously. That should be the goal of our publishing company, is we should create books for people who are passionate about books, for people who love reading and just want to do it with an excitement. And so what started out as her blog became our publishing company.
Okay. So for people to reach you, they just go to readfuriously.com, and there's a contact place in there. They fill in the blanks and you contact them, and that's basically it, right?
Yeah. We have a submissions team who reviews anything that may come in terms of manuscripts. We have sales teams who can handle anything in the way of wholesale or things like that. But yeah, the first place to start would be our website.
Okay. Well, Adam, it's been a real pleasure. I enjoyed today's conversation because this is totally different from what most of my authors that we have. So thank you so very much. And I look forward to chatting with you down the road again. Really do.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Okay. Take care, Adam. And again, Last of the Pops is his most recent book. The next show coming up literally in about 15 minutes is called The Wise Ones. Michiel Hoek, I think is the way he pronounces his name. He's a Belgian guy. I've had him on the Corner Bookstore before. Now he's going to be on The Wise Ones. And we have a lot of different things to talk about there outside just the fact that he's an author. And then I have my own show coming up at 1 o'clock, well, an hour and 15 minutes from now. And today I'm covering a personal dilemma of mine. Several months ago, I came down with shingles. And so I'm going to give you my personal story of what happened, what worked, what didn't work, what's still not working, and go into a lot of details about that. And then also kind of give you a snapshot as to, we talked the last 5 or 6 weeks about getting our New Year's resolution started today. And I'm going to give you my first version of that. So with that, this is Red O'Loughlin signing off on the Corner Bookstore, USA Global TV and Radio Network. Take care, y'all.
I just can't take it anymore. I am so tired. I am so frustrated and burnt out. Why won't anyone listen to what I have to say? Yet I look on social media and everybody's smiling and having a great time. Meanwhile, I feel totally alone with my world rushing by. Guess what? Great news. You have a choice. You can change the dynamic by learning how to listen at an elevated level yourself through the power of listening educational courses. Can you imagine from where you are today to having a life overflowing with abundance? It's possible. Learn how to listen at an elevated level. You'll have deeper connections, better relationships, and more authentic conversations. Start today. Go to usaglobaltv.com, education, and learn how to listen. We have courses and children's books. Let's work together to learn how to listen.